I learned today. I didn't know a lot about dog shows until today, and I'm learning so much just in this one day. But I learned that when the judges are judging the dogs, they kind of look for the purest form of that dog breed.
Well, each breed has a written standard, and that's been decided by the parent club and just over the years, because most of these dogs had, now not so much for the toy dogs, but they had a function. Form follows function. They have to have a certain body configuration, attitude, and all that to do the job they're bred for. Look at our herding dogs. They have to move in a certain way. And so our written standards, with the exception of the toys, although they're a terrier or they're a sturdy little dog, they reflect the best possible scenario for our dogs. And the point of showing is to find those that conform closest, and they're the ones that take preference in terms of the gene pool. You breed the best to the best, and you hope for the best.
We did that in biology class,
Yeah.
and I know what you're talking about, and I'm surprised that I do.
And the job of a breeder, the first thing a breeder needs to do is be absolutely dedicated to the standard and understand the history of their breed, and sometimes you have to be ruthless. If you may love the dog with all of your heart, but if it doesn't conform and it has major issues, they need to be out of the gene pool. But those are what people can have. They've had a puppy from a show breeder. Maybe it's a millimeter off here or there, you wouldn't understand, but it's had the same good genetic input, the same socialization, the same careful nurturing, because nurturing during mama's pregnancy and as the puppies are developing is extremely important. They've had all of that, and so they make actually the best pets for a family.
Because you do know from the set standard sort of what they're looking for, do you kind of know going into a show what your odds are, or is it kind of difficult? Does it depend on the judge?
The standard is like the outline, but as judges, I also judge the breed. When we read that standard, each judge in their mind, because it's very subjective, can prioritize certain traits. I'm a person who I feel that the hallmark of our breed is a beautiful head. So I'm going to prioritize that. Now, I'm already known for that, so if people are contemplating entering, they look and say, okay, she likes a good head, my dog is deficient a little bit in that area, so this is not a judge for me. That's kind of, and then some judges, nowadays we seem to have some judges who are very fixated on performance. My idea is this, that doesn't translate to the gene pool. Same thing with grooming. We have beautifully groomed dogs, and I want them beautifully groomed. That's a reflection of their purpose. But sometimes, they don't come out and come into the whelping box with the grooming brush and the groomer attached. So if that may be a point that I can give on. If I see a dog that is sounder and typier, I'm going to reward that before. But if you have two wonderful ones, then go ahead and pick the one that performs better and that is groomed. But you never want to compromise those traits that are most important in keeping our bloodlines viable and wonderful. And people say, well, how come the same dog doesn't win every day? Another judge might be fixated on the fact that they must be sound and they must move well, and we want everything. But when you're judging them, you can't have everything in the moment, so you prioritize. And the fact that not every judge has the same priority keeps our gene pool vibrant and viable, and it's wonderful.
Now, who is the person who decided way back when what the standard was?
Okay, with our Chihuahuas, they're almost a reconstruction. This breed is an Aztec dog. During the Spanish conquest, they almost went extinct. They existed in pockets. Actually, you probably don't know your history pretty well, but after the Civil War...
You're right, I don't.
Yeah, after the Civil War, it was fashionable to go on the Grand Tour, and some people went to Europe and some people went to Mexico. And they started turning up with the tourists that would come home, and they didn't do such a good job. Eventually, they fell into the hands of skilled breeders, and they basically tried to reconstruct what the breed had been. There are pottery depictions of the Chihuahuas, and they were integral to the Aztec religious life. So there are descriptions and pictures and we tried to recreate now and improve on. But the parent club in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when they first came over here, they formed a parent club, and the parent club, the consensus of the people that were working with the breed, they wrote our standard. Now, it is typically revised and improved on, and and tweaked, and sometimes not for the better, but they are the keepers of the legacy of our dogs. Now, in other breeds, the Pekingese standard derives from an empress way back when, and she had Pekingese, and she wrote the description of the ideal Pekingese, and when they were recognized and registered, of course the English first and then the Americans, we followed her guidelines from 2,000 years ago. Things like the sight hounds. You can look at depictions in Egyptian tombs, and you see these dogs. And there's the standard in living flesh.
So it was written long ago. The standard
Yes.
was decided
Almost literally written in the stone.
Now,
it sounds.
some breeds, like the sporting breeds, are relatively new. And the standard evolved from what worked best in the field. Yeah, and the breeders would select for those traits, and bit by bit it evolved into the standard for the breeds.
And I have to ask you, because I've never seen a dog show before. This is the first time we've ever been. And it was so interesting to watch the judge as he walked down the line, and you could kind of see that he had to make very quick judgments.
And the thing of it is, he's not comparing one dog to the other.
That's my question for you. You're a judge too. What does go through your mind?
You're comparing, in your mind, you must know what that standard says. And you should know it well enough to understand what you think are the most important factors. So you're comparing, as you walk down the line, you've got that standard in your mind, and you're comparing that dog to your ideal vision. Each one, not each other. And then now at the end, showmanship and behavior comes into, but that should be the minor part. Yeah. So you're not comparing, and when you get into
comparing the dogs, you're comparing the individual dog to the standard.
And when you get in the group and you see people say, well, how can you judge them all against each other, the different breeds? Because you're not judging them against each other, you're judging them against the standard.
And sometimes when I'm looking at the dogs, and I know different breeds have different personalities, but even say when I'm looking at the group of Chihuahuas, some of the dogs almost seem kind of poised and more professional, and some of them are acting excited and jumping
Playing
around
with
a little,
each other.
Playing with each other. How does that affect the judging?
Well, this is a terrier-like breed. I don't really care to see the presentation where they stand fixedly and look at the bait and are so overtrained. Terriers should interact with their environment. I want to see them sparring a little bit. And when I'm judging, we don't want down on the knees, hand stacking. I want to see these dogs stand freely. And other judges don't tolerate the deviation from statue perfect behavior as much, but I think that this breed, now that's appropriate for some breeds. You get something like the Border Collies. It's in their DNA to stare at something. That's how they control the sheep. So them standing stock still and staring at the food is fine. It's not appropriate for this breed.
You hired a handler.
Yes.
How do you hire a handler?
I don't usually do that. I prefer owner handlers, but I'm not too well today. I've had an issue with my back. I didn't feel that I could move him correctly, and we were scheduled to have two, and I thought that she would disturb him. His best chance, I felt. Also, we had a judge change. I had surmised that he would not care for the color. Unfortunately, trends happen, and fawns do a lot of winning, so people buy and use fawns and breed fawns. My threshold of boredom is very minimal. Been there, done that, had a fawn dog, had the first Chihuahua in the history of the breed to have best in shows in both the United States and Canada. There were plenty that had either or. And she was fun and delightful, and when I judge, I don't care if they're green. And I personally think between the Taco Bells and some of the other things, too many people think fawn is what they're supposed to be, and that's not correct.
We were talking about, I don't know if this is something that you consider very much, but the dress of the handlers is very specific. Is that a tradition? It's very professional, but it's flashy too.
This is Westminster, so people don't want to look like they're just hacking around locally. But at most shows, business casual or, is what because you got to remember, especially with this breed or any of the toy breeds, when you stack that dog on the table, you're the background. And you also have to be careful when they're down on the floor. Your pants are the background. So you want to present a good, and you want to look, like your.
That's a good point. When I was taking pictures earlier,
there's
a lot of pant legs.
Yeah, the dress code is not blue jeans and cutoffs and all that.
Last question for you, Maggie. What do these babies do when they're not competing? What are their lives like on the day-to-day?
Well, it's important to make them feel special and not too regimented. They're dogs. They're my companions when we get home. So any kind of trouble I get into, they get into it with me.